Under scaffolds and plastic sheeting, the psychiatric hospital of St. Pierre looked like a ship in dry dock, a 19th-century brick hull with its paint scraped to primer. The lime trees along the gravel walk were wrapped in warning tape. Window panes wore X's of blue masking, and the old ward signs, C, D, and E, were chalked again by contractors who didn't know the letters were already part of the building's bones. The workmen said asbestos and cracked pipes. The administrators said modernization. The nurses who had been here too long said that sometimes you must peel a place to see what it hid. In late October, the crew on Ward C rolled the last iron bedsteads into a corner and stacked the old horsehair mattresses like loaves. One of the men slid a seam with a hook knife to see if the batting could be recycled. A smell came out first, sweet, sour, a cupboard where apples died, then the silver shape of a bangle, then skin the color of paper. The men stepped back without speaking. Inside the open mattress lay what time had made of a woman. Her name was Claire Rousseau. In 1977, she had been 30, slim, dark-haired, a dressmaker's daughter who carried sketchbooks and cheap fountain pens, who kept a chipped white mug for tea and a book of poems by Prévert with a black-and-white photograph of her younger brother tucked inside the back cover. She had come to St. Pierre in February after a winter of sleeplessness that thickened into fear. Her mother said she had always been sensitive. The family doctor wrote, nervous exhaustion. The admitting psychiatrist wrote, schizoaffective features, evaluation. Claire wrote nothing at all in the space for patient's account. She sat with her hands folded and listened to the radiator tick as if it were telling her a time she did not recognize. Ward C was a long room with windows on one side and doors to small dormitories on the other. The beds had iron rails. The floors were linoleum mislabeled as hygienic because it could be mopped. Nurses wore blue and walked like people who had taught their shoes not to squeak. The attendants were men with keys. Claire learned the day's liturgy quickly. Tea in enamel mugs at dawn, pills in paper cups at 8, occupational therapy, beads, paper flowers, a loom that sang softly when you moved its comb, lunch of overboiled meat and carrots, visiting hour on Wednesdays and Sundays. She drew when paper was given and traced figures in the air when it wasn't. The bracelets her brother had bought at the market, 3 thin silver bangles, knocked together whenever she lifted her mug. Patients came and went with paperwork that made lines like railway timetables. The ward was a country whose borders moved. Claire's file grew thinly. Wait, pulse, cooperative, withdrawn, responds to music, asks for paper. Her mother brought biscuits and watched her try to smile. Her father carried a thermos and poured tea into the chipped mug as if pouring hope. On good days, Claire asked for lemon. Spring came with rain that made the lime trees shine like varnish. She slept sometimes. She told a nurse that the hymns in the chapel were written in a grammar she almost understood. She walked to occupational therapy, sewed 2 straight seams, and put her hand flat on the fabric when someone praised her, as if to keep it from blowing away. In May, she told her mother, I would like to go home by my birthday. The doctor said perhaps. On a Sunday in June, she did not come to the visiting room. The attendant said she was in rest. The next day, the charge nurse said she had been moved for observation. The day after that, the doctor told her parents, her treatment plan is being adjusted. They waited for the word transfer, then for discharge. None came. When they asked to see her, they were told she was resting again. After a week, the social worker said, there is no current visiting order under that name. Her father raised his voice and was asked to leave. They returned with a letter. The letter went unanswered. The hospital was a system that turned question into echo. Ward C's logbook that month has the neatness of a face arranged for a photograph. Under admissions, 3 names. Under discharges, 2. Under incidents, a fall, a scuffle over a radio, a mattress replaced. In the margin, a note in blue reads, linen inventory +6. The ward clerk copied numbers the way she had learned in school, making every 7 a strict crossing, every 1 a soldier. She didn't know a woman was missing from the arithmetic. Someone remembered a night in late June when a scream threaded the corridor and was clipped short. A nurse wrote nocturnal agitation and a dosage in milligrams. A patient down the hall dreamt of water and woke with her hair stuck to her cheek. An attendant told his wife later that a woman had been sheeted, the old shorthand, and his wife asked for the salt and didn't ask what sheeted had done. The doctor for Ward C wrote, increased supervision, on 3 charts. He did not write it on Claire's, because Claire's was no longer in his hand. In July, a clerk at the prefecture entered a letter from the Rousseau family into a tray with the paper clip already rusting. We have not seen our daughter Claire for 3 weeks. The hospital gives no answer. We ask for a record of transfer or discharge. The copy of the reply has been lost. A note on the hospital file reads, in pencil that later smudged, family advised to direct inquiries to Service C. The next sheet is a billing record for August. The line for Claire is blank. That is how disappearance becomes an account. The family kept asking. They telephoned and were told the administrator was in a meeting. They came in person and were told the ward was closed to visitors because of sanitation. They were referred to a number that rang and rang. In September, her mother sat on the bench under the lime trees and waited until a nurse came out to smoke. The nurse shook her head and said, "I can't," and dropped the match before it caught. In October, the hospital told the family, "No such patient is currently in our care." The next spring, the father went alone to the chapel and stared at the brass plate that said Saint Pierre, 1891, Dona Maria, in memoriam. He lied to his wife that he had seen their daughter asleep. He needed a sentence to carry home that was not empty. Years do disfigurement gently. Saint Pierre lost 3 wards to budget, then gained a new building with glass and automatic doors where you could see yourself coming and going. Ward C became a ghost floor preserved by neglect. The beds remained, then did not. The enamel mugs went to a thrift shop. Claire's chipped one did not. The window paint cracked so finely it looked like frost year-round. Nurses retired, then died. Attendants went to drive buses. Young psychiatrists arrived with new vocabularies they mistook for cures. The Rousseau family moved apartments, then towns. The bracelets lay in a drawer wrapped in tissue. The photograph of the young brother by a lake faded on the mantel. In 2019, the renovation plan called for Ward C to be stripped to brick. The contractors wore Tyvek and duct taped their wrists when they worked under old pipe lagging. They made jokes about ghosts the way men in masks do when a room will not answer them. On a Wednesday afternoon, Michelle, who had spent 20 years cutting carpet and ought to have been bored by the sheer repetition of hospital floors, dragged a stack of old mattresses with a dolly to the corner where the skip waited. They were heavy and old, the kind stuffed with horsehair and cotton that sigh out dust when you move them. One split in his hands. He swore. The dust had a taste like a chalkboard kissed in a dare. He took his hook knife, a short blade with a round lip, and cut cleanly along the seam for curiosity and to make the thing less awkward to carry. Inside, he saw leather first, dark and shrunk like fruit. Then a wrist with bracelets that had tarnished to a gray that wasn't metal anymore, but memory. The room buckled in his vision. He stepped back and said the only word that did not invent anything. Qualcoan. The police came as they come now, with tape and boots and a language that makes even horror sound procedural. They sealed Ward C and worked slowly. The mattress, cut wider, gave up a shape that had been pressed into it by decades. A woman's body shrunken. Knees pressed inward, hands down by thighs, head tipped to shoulder. The stuffing had made a desiccating cocoon. Air had moved just enough to deny rot its carnivory. The bracelets still circled both wrists. 3 thin bangles on one, 2 on the other, silver gone the color of old pewter. In the chest cavity, where paper had been pressed by weight and time, there was a folded photograph. The emulsion had bled into the fibers, but you could still make out a young man's dark hair and the glare of light off water behind him. Someone held it with gloved fingers and said, "Sewn photo," as if naming it returned it to its century. The autopsy offered a narrow hallway of answers, as autopsies must when time has been at work. Adult female, about 30 at death. No evidence of sharp force trauma. No fractures in the skull or long bones. Finger bones with pressure deformities consistent with restraint. No soft tissue to test for chemicals. Foreign fibrous material in nasal passages consistent with mattress batting. Cause of death, undetermined. Asphyxia in enclosed environment possible. Her teeth, 6 fillings, 1 broken incisor repaired badly. Matched the dental card in a file that had been misfiled under Roussel for 42 years. A ring of pigment on the wrist bones where bracelets had rested. A trace of cotton fiber woven fine as thread caught under what had been a thumbnail. The prefecture reopened a thin file whose staples had left orange rust shadows on paper. The first page, Rousseau, Claire. Admission, February 14, 1977, Ward C. The second, a discharge card without a signature or date. The third, a letter from the family with a neat, desperate hand. "Please tell us, our daughter Claire," and a stamp that said received July 21, 77. The fourth, nothing. The clerks who had written "no such patient" were dead. The administrators had been promoted, then forgotten. The nurses who might have dared to remember did so at kitchen tables and said only, "They told us not to ask." Newspapers in 2019 wrote, "What newspapers must." Mummified woman found in psychiatric ward mattress. Missing since the 1970s. The radio read the autopsy's least revealing line as if it were revelation. Television filmed the red tape across Ward C and sneaked a telephoto across the door into a room where dust did not yet know it had been seen. Online, someone wrote monsters, and someone else wrote "This is why we closed the big places," and someone still else wrote "My aunt disappeared in 1982 and they told us she ran away." The hospital issued a statement that sounded like a machine reciting, "We are cooperating fully. We express our profound sorrow to the family." The director looked gray under the lights. He had inherited a building and a long sin, and now his face would carry both. The Rousseau family, fewer now, came in a small group to the police station where a detective with ash on his sleeve spoke carefully around the word remains. He showed them the bracelets in a tray, then the photograph, then shut the folder quietly because grief is a noise you should not shout over. Claire's brother touched the bracelets without touching them, the way a hand hovers above a stove to test heat. He was a man in his 50s now, his life bent around the absence as trees bend around fences. He said, "My mother always said she could hear the hospital bell in the night when there was no wind." The detective wrote that in his notes because it was not evidence and still needed a place to live. What happened grew versions as ivy grows on brick. The simplest version said, "She crawled inside." Ward C had old mattresses with tears in the ticking. Anxious patients hid under beds and in cupboards. One could imagine a woman pushing her way into warmth in the middle of the night and the weight of her body closing the seam behind her. But the bracelets, why were they still on if she had fumbled in with her hands? And the finger bones showed pressure where something had cinched. And that line in the logbook, linen inventory +6, sounded unlike accident. The second version said, she was restrained, the old way, with sheets and knots and a nurse's knee, and wrapped into the mattress as a way to stop her struggling while they waited for the doctor, who never came. The third said, she died under restraint and the staff, scared of scandal, decided on concealment. Stitch the seam. Note, mattress replaced. Tell the family nothing. Wait for time to do the cleaning that could not be done with soap. The fourth, the one whispered in narrow kitchens by women who had worked nights and knew the sound a man's voice makes when he is lying, said, a particular attendant was rough, a particular nurse was tired, a particular night made a permanent error. Names were changed into initials. Initial morphed into silence, and silence hardened into a seam. There were documents, not many, but enough to make a shape. A purchase order for 3 rolls of mattress ticking dated June 27, 77. A memo from the physician superintendent. Restraint protocols to be reviewed. Please avoid improvisations. A note from the matron. Sheet usage high. Staff reminded. Keep medroom locked. A single line from a ward nurse, and signed, misfiled among supply requests. We need more hands at night. There was also a prayer card found in the chapel's poor box, and signed, for Claire, that she is not cold. The paper had been folded twice and unfolded 100 times. A retired nurse, coaxed by her daughter, spoke to a journalist and then asked not to be named. She remembered a June storm and a woman shouting a poem that would not end, and 2 attendants carrying her back to bed, and one of them saying, use the sheets, and the other saying, no belts left, and the first saying, then make do. She could not swear on anything except the way her hands shook after. The journalist printed her voice as a block quote, and then as a rumor because lawyers have their own medicine. The hospital's new protocol manual grew a chapter overnight. No unsupervised restraint. 2 staff minimum. Body cams trialed on nights. The director ordered an audit of every death in the records. He discovered that in 1973 someone had died, unexpectedly, natural causes, and in 1981 another had fallen from bed. Both had signatures fossilized in ink without names written clearly enough to read. He did not sleep for a week. He walked Ward C at dawn when contractors were out and stood in front of the corner where the mattresses had been stacked and put his hands in his coat because he had nothing else to do with them. The burial was ordinary and thus clean. A small oak coffin, bones wrapped in linen, the bracelets laid on the cloth the way sailors coil lines. The photograph went into the coffin at the brothers' insistence. The priest spoke of mercy and did not say closure because he knew the word is a door that never fits its frame. Claire's mother, who had lived long enough to be carried, pressed her palm to the lid before it lowered and whispered, you were not alone, as if time were a window that would open if addressed correctly. The grave was filled. The bracelets had clicked one last time when moved. They would not again. After the cemetery, the family sat in a kitchen and drank tea from mugs that were not chipped and did not taste of iron. The brother opened the drawer where the tissue lay and then closed it, the space finally empty on purpose. St. Pierre keeps on with its days. The new glass building has automatic doors that sigh as if tired of themselves. The old brick wards are being gutted for offices, archives, perhaps a museum room with a text panel that knows how to apologize without lying. Ward C's corridor still collects the cold. Men work with respirators and headlamps and talk into their phones during breaks as if the present could be spoken loud enough to drown the past. At night, patients in the new wards tell each other about the mattress ghost and decide whether to be frightened or to feel, for once, seen. The police file closed because the law has only 2 drawers, solved and not. Cause of death, undetermined. Probable identity, Rousseau, Claire. Location of discovery, Ward C mattress, St. Pierre Psychiatric Hospital. Action taken, remains released to family. Hospital cautioned, recommendations forwarded to ministry. The detective who wrote the last line added, in his private notebook, a sentence he would let no one read. A scene can be a sentence if no one is allowed to unpick it. In the departmental museum, there is now a narrow case. Inside, on black cloth, lies one of the silver bangles, donated by the family with the condition that her name be written in full and the year of her disappearance not be called a mystery, but a failure. Beside it sits a white enamel mug, chipped, not Claire's, which could not be found, but one from Ward C's cupboard identical. Between them, a copy of a poem by Pervert, open to a page that says, Illinois Faudra Lur Dyer. The label reads, Personal effects emblematic of patient life at St. Pierre, 1970s. In memory of Claire Rousseau, 1947 to 1977. There are versions still whispered that she had drawn on the back of the mattress with a pencil stub, little houses and a lake, that the attendants flipped the mattress and told themselves they had reversed time, that a thread was left trailing like a fuse and no one lit it. Most of these are the heart looking for images strong enough to endure anger. The truth may be plainer and harder. A woman asked for paper. A night grew long. A seam was made. A line was not entered in a book. A family went home with their mouths full of words that could not turn into speech. If you walk there on a weekday morning, when the lime trees salt the air with their green, you can stand under the windows of Ward C and listen. You will hear renovation noise, the steady whine of a saw and a low thump of mallets. You will hear a delivery truck reverse. You will hear the chapel bell count the hours. If the wind drops, you will hear leaves, not voices, turning themselves over. The instinct is to make a ghost that stitches at night, that clinks her bracelets to warn the living. It's an honest instinct and not necessary. The better haunting is administrative, a blank line in a ledger where a human sentence belongs. The hospital could name a room after her, and perhaps it will. Plaques have their uses. Better would be to name a protocol. Every discharge signed in ink you can erase. Every family called twice. Every mattress counted. Every restraint done with the door open and the lights on and the words spoken aloud. We are holding you because we are afraid you will harm yourself. We will not harm you. Better to require that when anyone asks, where is she? The person asked must answer in fewer than 24 hours and with a fact. This is not poetry, but poetry owes its meter to the heartbeats we do not interrupt. The renovation finished that winter. Ward C became storage and then something else. The old beds were scrapped, except one that a nurse, stubborn as bread, kept in her garage because she could not bear to see everything go at once. The contractors swept. The cleaning crew mopped the corridor until the water ran clear. The smell lifted. In spring the lime trees flowered and bees worked the tassels like a choir warming its mouth. Patients in the new building were allowed to sit on the steps for sun. In July a family came with flowers and set them not at a memorial but at the base of a tree. A boy of 6 asked who Claire was. His father said, she was someone who should have come home. The boy nodded because some answers are finished before they are begun. At night, when nurses do their rounds, a set of bangles sits on the station desk, not as fetish but as oath. They do not belong to Claire. They are a symbol that does not pretend to be more than that. Metal remembers fingers. It cools and warms easily. It makes a sound you can hear even under a machine. A mug with a crack lives beside the kettle. New staff ask why it hasn't been thrown out, and someone older says, because it reminds us to pour carefully. In the staff room, a photocopy of a page from Pervert is taped to the fridge with a line underlined. On any dit jamais it says aux gens couon and couon les same. You cannot build a system out of lines like that, but you can thread them through the edges so the seams do not fail in the night. The story ends, as these stories do, with a grave in a glass case and a building that goes on. It also ends with a seam unpicked. Inside the mattress there had been a body. Inside the body a breath. Inside the breath a voice that was not recorded because no one held a microphone to it when it mattered. The hospital did not mean to be a tomb. It became one for a time. Now it tries to be a house again, of treatment, of waiting, of cups of tea poured so hot you must blow on them and listen to someone speak who has not spoken for weeks. If you are lucky, a bracelet will clink and make you look up. If you are good, you will write the name and the date and the hour in a book that does not lie.